What if I told you that India's democracy was being auctioned behind closed doors? What if I told you that corporate money, anonymous and untraceable, was deciding the fate of our elections? In February 2024, the Supreme Court delivered a historical judgment, striking down the Electoral Bonds Scheme, a policy that allowed corporations and individuals to donate to political parties without public disclosure. Many believed this verdict would restore transparency in political funding, but did it? In this episode of the next hearing, we will break down why this judgment was unexpected, how the government has found new ways to maintain control over election funding, and what this means for India's democracy in 2025 and beyond. To understand the significance of this Supreme Court verdict, let's first break down what the Electoral Bonds Scheme really was. 2017, by the government, the Electoral Bonds Scheme was designed to enable individuals and corporations to donate money to political parties anonymously. The government claimed this move was aimed at curbing black money in elections while protecting donor privacy. These bonds were issued by SBI, which is State Bank of India, and could be purchased by any Indian citizen or company, and then donated to a political party without revealing the donor's identity to the public. The reality? The scheme created a legalized system of opaque political funding, where massive corporate donations could flow without scrutiny, giving unfair advantage to the ruling party. Since SBI handled all transactions, the government always knew who was donating how much to which party, while opposition parties had no such insights. Foreign corporate donations were also allowed, opening the doors for foreign influence in Indian elections. Many from Chinese also donated. The biggest beneficiary is the ruling party, which received most of the electoral bond donations. Let's find out how democracy fought it back. The controversy surrounding electoral bonds led to a massive legal battle. Public interest groups like the Association for Democratic Reforms and Common Cause filed petitions against the scheme, arguing that it violated the fundamental principles of transparency and fairness in elections. Main legal arguments against electoral bonds were violation of Article 19, Sub-Article 1A, right to information. Voters have a right to know who funds political parties. Anonymity in donations leads to corruption and quid pro quo deals. Number 2, violation of Article 14, which is right to equality. Electoral bonds gave an unfair advantage to the party which had access to donor identity through SBI, while opposition parties did not. The verdict came in February 2024. The Supreme Court unanimously struck down the electoral bond schemes as unconstitutional. The court ruled that secrecy in political funding undermined free and fair elections. It directed the State Bank of India to disclose all donation details in the Election Commission. It was a historical victory for electoral transparency, or so we thought. You would think that after the Supreme Court judgment, political funding in India would become more transparent. But here's the harsh reality. Instead of making elections fair, the ruling party found new ways to consolidate control over corporate donations. Let's find out how the government of India is circumventing the Supreme Court judgment. Number 1, using investigative agencies to coerce donations. Several companies that previously donated to opposition parties faced ED, CBI and IT raids. Once under pressure, many were forced to voluntarily contribute to the ruling party. Number 2, corporate fear tactics. CEOs of major companies were warned against donating to opposition parties, fearing government backlash. This has led to a massive funding imbalance in 2024 elections, with the ruling party receiving record-breaking donations. And even after elections, their fund has increased. Alternative funding channels. The ruling party pressured business tycoons to donate directly to party-controlled trusts. Cash donations, which were harder to trace, increased significantly. Essentially, while electoral bonds are gone, the system remains as corrupt as ever. Only the methods have changed. What are its impact on opposition parties? With limited funding sources, opposition parties have struggled to match the ruling party's vast financial resources in elections. This has resulted in less competitive democratic process. What are its impact on voter choice? With fewer voices being heard due to funding disparity, elections are skewed towards the party with the biggest war chest. Democracy is increasingly becoming a money driven system rather than a choice driven one. The Supreme Court judgment on electoral bonds was a legal victory, but the battle for fair elections is far from over. If we truly want democracy free from corporate control, we need to demand strict enforcement of political funding transparency laws, push for public financing of elections to reduce corporate influence, ensure investigative agencies remain independent and unbiased in their actions. What do you think? Has the Supreme Court's verdict changed anything? Or is India's democracy still at risk? Comment below and let's start a conversation.